Some of you here are talking about Keir Starmer's dad. Now, did you see there was it wasn't a debate, it was an interview, I guess, an event, whatever you want to call it, last night. And the audience, they laughed at Keir Starmer when he said his dad was a toolmaker. Well, Keir Starmer's been speaking to GBNews today, and he's responded to that. Watch.
The crowd laughed when he said, your dad's a toolmaker. Why is that? Do you think you've got nothing more to say? Are they getting tired of the same comment?
Let me directly address you on that. My dad worked in a factory all his life. He felt people disrespected him.
Oh.
And
that's not happening with the laughing.
I do want to see this through, because it actually hit a nerve last night.
Yeah.
Because he felt that in the usual conversation, when someone says, what do you do for a living, socially, he would say, I work in a factory. And there'd be a pause where nobody quite knew what to say. And he felt really disrespected. It caused him in his life to withdraw from social engagements. He didn't do it much later in life because it was raw to him that he should be disrespected because he worked in a factory. So when someone laughed last night, my dad would have turned in his grave.
Really? I mean, I don't mean to be rude, obviously, but people were not laughing at the fact that his dad worked in a factory. People were laughing because it's almost like you can play buzzword bingo. You know for a fact that within minutes of one of these conversations starting, Rishi Sunak's going to wheel out the facts of what his parents did, and Keir Starmer's going to wheel out that line that his dad was a toolmaker. So that's why people are laughing, because it's become like the whole buzzword bingo. It's nothing to do with disrespecting people that work in factories. There's nothing wrong with working in a factory. And if you're telling someone that you work in a factory and your social group goes silent for a moment, you need to change your social group. That's what I would say. Bill?
I kind of agree with you, Michelle. I think the audience were laughing because they're a politically engaged audience and they've heard it many times from Keir. But there are millions of people who are not politically engaged, who are looking at these issues for the first time in this campaign, and it has cut through. The most fascinating thing about the post...
What's got cut through?
Keir's background. So the most fascinating thing about the post-debate poll last night, which Keir won hands down 2-1, but on the underlying questions, in touch with ordinary people, Keir won 71% to 13% against Rishi Sunak. And that's Sunak's problem, and it's Keir's advantage.
Just on that, I mean, I think in fairness, though, I mean, Keir Starmer could have been debating a dead fish, and I think the dead fish would have done better than Rishi Sunak. I mean, the point is that I think... people out there are kind of sick of the sort of SW1 narrative, you know, the kind of woe me, look at what happened to my family 50 years ago, 75 years ago. I think they're just they're sick of this kind of like bland Westminster story. The other thing is, I sort of struggled with Keir Starmer's justification there, because when his father was working in a factory, I mean, pretty much most working age people at that time would have been working in manual jobs. So it wasn't actually that unusual. Most of my family were in factories at the time. I don't think it was a sort of unusual thing that he's making out that it was. And the idea that Starmer's kind of more in touch with the values of ordinary people, certainly compared to Rishi Sunak, but let's be frank, this is the none of the above election. None of them are really connecting with the public. I think Bill and I actually agree there's no mass public enthusiasm for either of the two big parties.
But there's mass determination to get this Tory
But there's mass determination to get the Tories out, and I completely agree with you on that. I mean, Sunak, you know, the one thing that struck me, I think the one thing we're going to be talking about with this election, or historians are going to talk about it 50 years from now, will be the D-Day debacle, will be the Rishi Sunak D-Day debacle. Because that in itself crystallised for many people not this kind of view that we have a technocratic, managerial Prime Minister who isn't quite in touch with the country. It sort of raised this deeper, more existential question about, does this guy actually believe in Britain? And I think that handed both Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage, actually, an open goal on the campaign trail.
Yeah, but I disagree, Matthew, in the sense that your background and the values it gives you does matter to people. They want a sense of where you're coming from and what drives you in politics. And Keir talking about his... And I actually don't think he's done it enough. It's only recently, with the Tom Baldwin book about him, that he started talking about his background and the way that it shaped him. And I think that does cut.
But there is a tension, though, isn't there, right? I'm the guy who's on the side of ordinary working people. Except when ordinary working people voted for Brexit, he was the guy that decided he actually wanted them to vote again and again and again until they made the right decision. So is he on the side of ordinary working people and their values? I think the jury's out. And this was also the guy that told us to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister twice. So, you know,
well,
I'm
Rishi
suspicious.
Sunak's the guy who said Boris Johnson Prime Minister.
I'm not here to defend Rishi
Brexit,
Sunak.
Keir has listened, and since he's been leader of the Labour Party, he's made it abundantly clear that we're not going to turn history back or try to turn history back by renegotiating Brexit. But we do want a better deal with the European Union, which is manifestly in our interest.
And by the way, it was the British people on the majority that voted to make Boris Johnson the Prime Minister. That's who people actually voted in.
Indeed.
And a lot of people actually would say that one of the mistakes that the Tory party have made was ousting Boris the way that they did. And I know that the flip side to that, people will say that Boris absolutely deserved to be ousted. Coming back to this factory thing, do you work in a factory? Do you think there's any shame in working in a factory? I most certainly don't. Two of my brothers work in factories. Absolutely no wrong with it. So I'm not really sure what Keir Starmer was going on about there. Anyway, also Ed Davey, have you seen his antics? We had some of those in the headliners. What do you think to this? I mean, I'll bring you a clip up now. He's like, today he's got his shorts and T-shirts on, if you're listening on the radio, doing some kind of tyre, jumping. I mean, I look at him and I just think you look a bit ridiculous. What do you think?
He's getting visibility and he's getting exposure. Look, nobody ever analyses the Lib Dem manifesto and programme for government, because everyone knows they're almost certainly not going to form the government, but they struggle for visibility, and these stunts are getting him that. And I'll make a prediction: because of the determination to get rid of the Tories and tactical voting, I think the Lib Dems are going to get 50 or 60 seats.
I think he should line up some of those sub-postmasters that was affected when he turned round and said that he wouldn't meet Mr Bates. You should get them in the sidelines watching some of these antics. I'd love to know their reaction to it all.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's revealing, isn't it, that the only politician who I can see who's actually doing old-fashioned grassroots, real politics, meeting people on the street, walking into communities and towns that he hasn't been in before is Nigel Farage. And I think one of the interesting things this week we saw was that the bricks being hurled at Farage in Barnsley by the radical left activist, it would have been nice to have seen the political class on the left, the right, the centre. It would have been nice to see everybody come together and say that is completely unacceptable to the extent that they do when a mainstream politician is being targeted. There are two cases in this campaign: a milkshake, which, let's be frank, could have been acid.
Wholly wrong.
A brick, which could have easily hit Farage in the head.
People will push back. It wasn't
okay,
brick.
rocks,
Coffee cup,
whatever it was. The point is, we are getting perilously close here to somebody experiencing serious real-world violence and harassment.
We've had it.
And yeah, we've had it with MPs. But I feel with Farage it's a double standard, actually. I feel like people don't take that as seriously.
Matthew, with respect, I don't think you're listening. I heard statements from both the Labour front bench and the Tory front bench.
Yvette Cooper came out and condemned it. James Cleverly came out and condemned it. I remember that.
And I tell you what, my reaction was real anger with that nutter who threw whatever it was at Nigel Farage. Completely unacceptable. We've had two MPs of both parties murdered in the last few years in this country.
Agreed.
And, you know, people like that, we ought to throw the book at them.
In a minute, I shall get to you. I want to show you a clip of Dawn Butler. One of the things that she has done today is very weird, everyone, I can tell you that. And I want to talk about Nigel Farage in a second. And you do say that, you know, we have had two MPs murdered absolutely horrendously. I remember the last one, David Amis, that was murdered by an Islamist fanatic. And I remember the conversation being all about how we should be nicer to each other on social media. No one was actually willing to address the issues behind why that MP lost his life. Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we do need to address the underlying issues. But I tell you what, the world has changed since I was a Member of Parliament, and social media is part of that. I only feared for my safety once in 13 years when I was a Member of Parliament. I think today, and I know from talking to colleagues... And what
happened there, if you don't mind me asking?
I was in my surgery and had my PA sitting next to me. Wrongly, we had our backs to the window. He was sitting opposite and he got really, really agitated. And, you know, both of us said afterwards we thought he was going to go for us. But that was once in 13 years. MPs today virtually experience that every day of the week.
Well, yeah, but like we're saying, social media, and I am going to play Dawn Butler in a sec, don't worry, social media has played a part in that. And I think actually it's a lot of it is anonymity on social media. If you stripped people's ability to be anonymous, I think you would remove so much abuse literally overnight.
I agree completely. I mean, most of the abuse I get on X is from anonymous accounts, and also disgruntled left-wing academics, but that's another story.
Let me show you Dawn Butler's video today.
Dawn Butler and Nelson Production. Come on, 4th of July, don't forget to... We got 21 days to go. We got 21 days to go. If you like, let me know, let me out the shadow. Got 21 days because I gotta go. Wish you at D-Day, where did he go? Say wish you at D-Day, where did he go? Like, don't let a liar run the show. Like, don't let a liar run the show. If you like me, let me know, let me out the shadow. Got 21 days before I gotta go. 21 days to go. 21 days to go. 21 days.
Speechless.
I mean, what do you want me to say? I mean, I'm sorry, these aren't serious politicians. It's not serious people.
Look, so many people are apathetic, disengaged. It's an attempt to get cut through. Personally, I wouldn't do it.
I just think it's embarrassing. And I think, do you know what? Honestly, I actually feel a little bit depressed at the low calibre of politicians that we've got in this country. I want us to have politicians that have really achieved stuff in their life, that have got substance, are the best of the best, a creme de la creme, proper, serious people. And I see the antics that are going on, and I just think it makes me less inclined to vote rather than more inclined to vote. What about you? What does it do when you see those rap video? Well, was that a rap video? I don't know what it was, quite frankly. Does it make you more inclined to turn out and vote, or does it disengage you? Your thoughts on that?